First oral question, Boris Strathclyde.
My Lords, I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name in the order paper.
The Government is satisfied that negotiations on amendments to the international health regulations comply with Article 55 of those regulations. Member States proposed amendments which were communicated to all Member States in December 22 and then posted online. Since then, Member States have been negotiating the proposals. As per Article 55, the timeline is well in advance of the World Health Assembly this May, where they are due to be considered for agreement.
Thank you, my noble friend the Minister, for the reply. And irrespective of the WHO's current interpretation of its own rules, the fact remains that 55.2 clearly says it's required to give Member States 4 months written notice before the amendments are agreed at the end of this month, and it has clearly failed to do so. Bearing this in mind, and also that the Government has been less than transparent about the UK's aims in these negotiations, and bearing in mind the WHO's woeful performance in the COVID pandemic, would the Minister agree that, regardless of the legal position, it would be wise to delay the votes until the next WHO so that we can have proper parliamentary scrutiny of what the Government is signing us up to?
Well, I think the key thing that we're looking at here, which I would hope that all of us could agree on, is that we're not going to agree to anything in this process which impacts our sovereignty as a country and our ability to react to a pandemic in a way which is appropriate for this country and this government. I hope that that's something that we can all rely on, and that is very much our approach to these negotiations.
Objective 2 of the UK's Global Health Framework says that the Government will reform global health architecture, including through a strengthened World Health Organization, driving more coherent governance and collaboration across the international system. Aside from producing a winning sentence for policy buzzword bingo, can the noble Lord the Minister point to any specific global health architecture wins that the Government has had in the year since that policy was published?
What I can talk about, and I'm not sure actually what year that policy was published, but I can talk about when we were president of the G7 in 2021, we led the cause to donate vaccines on a worldwide basis, which led to 1.2 billion doses being donated to countries all around the world, led by Britain's initiative with AstraZeneca, something which I think is great global cooperation and something we can feel very proud of.
The Government said that it would learn the lessons from the COVID problems. How has the Government tackled the issue of production of equipment that were needed for COVID that we didn't have, and the Government promised to actually make sure that we had it next time? Can you give us an update on that?
Yes, and of course we covered much of this when we had the question, I think on the 15th of April around this, and it's making sure that we have got the diagnostic capability, which we do have, and the ability to scale up. We've actually made a 125 million fund available for precisely the issue that the noble Lord mentions, that we have got the mothball capacity ready to operate at quick notice.
My Lords, on the 14th of January 2020, the World Health Organization declared that there was no evidence of person-to-person transmission of the COVID virus. It was parroting the line of the Chinese government that at that time was terrified of any investigation of the lab leak theory. Does my noble friend the Minister worry that giving more powers of coordination and control to this body will mean less diversity, more homogeneity, and the suppression of any attempt to be a Sweden or a Florida or anyone else who might buck the consensus and thereby, God forbid, suggest that these extreme and draconian lockdowns may not have been the best policy response?
So I think we're talking about two very, very different things here. One is making sure that we as a country are armed with the information as quickly as possible so we can act, and I think actually getting the genomic sequencing of the original vaccine, of the original strain, was vital for us to be able to prepare vaccine so quickly for it all. That information sharing is vital. As far as actually that impacting our ability to act as a sovereign government, that's something very, very different. And it's something that is absolutely key and understood. And the COVID inquiry now is all about learning lessons. As my noble friend knows, I have personal views about that second lockdown, whereby we need to be looking at the wider impact of that second lockdown in areas such as mental health and a lot of the other areas that's impacted children on. But that's a matter that will always be for the UK government to decide on.
Will the Minister not agree that such problems as arose at the time of the COVID pandemic in respect to WHO was because the WHO was let down by one of its members and was not properly informed quickly enough of the symptoms that were occurring in that country? It's no point, therefore, in blaming it when the blame rests with the whole collective membership of the WHO and now needs to be repaired. Would he not agree, therefore, that postponing that repair work would not serve our or anyone else's purpose?
I do agree. I don't think it would help to postpone it. I had this conversation exactly with the American Health Secretary, who's very aware that we are actually going into, obviously, nearer and nearer to an American election. And I think actually for all the countries to be able to cooperate fully, the timing is right to try and reach a solution now. However, we're not going to reach an agreement at any cost or anything which will impact our sovereignty.
My Lords, the Brownstone Institute, to which the Noble Lord's question refers, was set up to work against COVID restrictions and lists articles that argue that COVID-19 vaccines don't work, that children should not be vaccinated, and vaccine mandates compare with the crimes of the Soviet Gulag. So, on this basis, perhaps the Noble Lord, the Minister, might like to make comment on what note he should be taking of the Brownstone Institute, if any, and also what assessment has been made of the impact of dangerous propaganda like this on the low take-up rates of vaccinations that we see amongst minority ethnic groups and where there are regional and social disparities.
I thank the noble lady, and I think all members of the House, when we had a good question on this area about the take-up of COVID vaccines, agreed absolutely in that information supporting the take-up is a vital health message that gets across. And to any detractors of that, I would say very, very firmly, it's not the view of the government, and I know it's not the view of nearly all the noble lords.
My Lords, am I right, returning to the treaty, am I right in thinking that it contains a provision that envisages a role for the WHO in vaccine certification? If that's the case, how would that have played out when we wished to roll out our own vaccine very speedily? Would we have had to wait for WHO certification?
Well, again, I think noble lord, noble friend will agree with me that actually our ability to assess the vaccine quicker than any other country and roll it out very, very quickly was a key asset for the UK. Clearly, we're not going to do anything which is going to put that at risk.